let's look at what is discourse analysis. There's no single definition about discourse analysis, and it does not provide a solution to a problem, but uncovers motivations behind a discourse production. A discourse is a set of spoken and written words cohesively connected to make sense. It can yield a language beyond sentences. It can also produce languages in use. What it does is either with the language beyond sentences or languages in use, it creates a larger institutional social processes. So yielding language beyond sentences, producing languages in use that creates larger institutional social processes are called the discourse production. And in discourse analysis, what we do is we analyze the discourse production. In discourse analysis, there are three parts that interact: context, language tools, and discourse. Language tools and discourse are the linguistic part, and context is the cultural part. Language tools are the social languages, conversations, and relationships between texts. Discourse are the set of spoken and written words cohesively connected to make sense. With the interaction of the cultural part and the linguistic part, it produces a discourse. And this discourse production are a language in use and language beyond sentences, creating large institutional processes are the way people think, speak, write, and conduct. A context is a situation within which something exists or happens that can help explain it. For example, travel, work, home are contexts. So with the context, the discourse production can also change because it's the linguistic part and the cultural part that interacts for the discourse production, and the cultural part is context, and in this instance it is time. Foucault looked at madness over time period and found that the discourse was producing at one period it as spiritual possession, in another period as social deviance, and in the contemporary situation as mental illness. Another example is homosexuality. In the context of time, Discourse produced it as a diverse act. Thereafter, a social deviance. Then came social acceptance, and currently, in some countries, discourse has produced political acceptance. So the context, which is the cultural part, the linguistic or the language tools, and the discourse that makes sense, interact to produce a contextual discourse. And this contextual discourse, for example, could be in the religious context, or in the political context, or national context. And the discourse produced can shape practices, ways of thinking, speaking, writing, and conducting. By looking at the discourse production, discourse analysis attempt to understand social practices and their implications. There are three ways to analyze the discourse production. One is the linguistic analysis. It's looking at the use of syntax in language, the rules in language. Second is the empirical analysis. It's about the social use of language. Third is the critical analysis. It's about looking at the discourse production from the perspective or from the lens of power. So in critical analysis, the linguistic part and the cultural part interact to produce a discourse in a context. But it is mediated by oppressive forces. So the oppressive forces such as religion, politics, nationalism, they can shape the practices, ways of thinking, speaking, writing, and conducting. And using critical analysis, the discourse production in relation to these oppressive forces. There are three approaches to discourse production analysis. Formal linguistic discourse analysis. It examines underlying rules of linguistics and communicative function. For example, if a researcher wants to investigate human to human versus human to machine dialogues for decision making, the approach could be a formal linguistic discourse analysis to examine the rules of language in the communication. Second is empirical discourse analysis. In that, the research examines the underlying themes or patterns in sociological use of language. An example would be to look at the themes and functions in conversations and genres. Third is critical discourse analysis, to look at how language in use can construct power through oppression. An example would be to construct social words by text and social use of language.